This is Ben Sher, and this is Coffee Talk.
Hi everyone, I'm Kim Perlak. I'm the chair of the guitar department at Berklee College of Music, and welcome to another Coffee Talk. We're here as usual this morning with our assistant chair, Sheryl Bailey. Hey Sheryl, good morning. Coffee cheers.
Definitely have coffee and yes, very
Yeah.
happy about the coffee.
You went old school with your mug today. I went new school, newish
I know,
school.
I just ran into a big coffee talk fan and they were jonesing for a mug.
I know. That's the thing. They are in the bookstore. The new Coffee Talk mugs are in the bookstore, so we'll try to get them online as soon as we can. Um, we're also joined this morning by Ben Cody, our senior coordinator. Hey, Ben.
Hi, Kim.
Good morning. And our special guest today is Professor Ben Sher in the guitar department. Hey, Ben.
Yay, yay, hey guys.
Great to see you. So Ben, we always start off with the same question, and the question is, how do you take your coffee?
Well, that's a very good question. So I live in Brooklyn and I spend a lot of time in Boston. So you'd think that I would be able to find, a great roast of coffee. But actually, my favorite roast of coffee comes from I travel on Thursdays to a small rural town in PA, Kutztown, PA. It's a town, but they have this unbelievable coffee roaster there called Four Monkeys Coffee. So that's my favorite coffee. And today, the guitar department is drinking coffee from Four Monkeys Coffee.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's great. Thank you so much for bringing that. That's so
Absolutely.
cool. Really
Yes.
appreciate that.
The
Um,
particular roast you're drinking is called Good Morning Monkeys. So there you go.
that- There's a lot in there. I love that. That's
Yes, there's a
great.
lot in
That's really great. It does feel like a little bit of a circus at the end of the semester, so we appreciate that. That's really great. Um, so Ben, a lot of the people who listen to the podcast are in their first year at Berklee or their first semester because we're in the fall semester. And so we like to ask people about first days. And you had a number of different first days. Here at Berklee, and I'm wondering if there's something that a memory that sticks out to you about one of those first days.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question because I've had three different first days at Berkeley. The first was in 1975 when I first came for 5 week, and
Wow.
then the second was in 1988 when I first joined the faculty, and then the second one was in 2000 when I rejoined the faculty. So my three first impressions will kind of give you an interesting outlook into how Berkeley and Boston in general kind of has changed over the years. In 1975, when I first came here, I was coming from Pittsburgh, PA, and all of a sudden, I was like, wow, there was so many unbelievable guitar players. I went to see at Pooh's Pub in Kenmore Square. I heard Pat Metheny, Jaco Pastorius, and Bob Moses, and this was before they made Bright Size Life. So, I went back to Pittsburgh saying, you got to hear this guy, Pat Metheny, and everybody says, Pat Martino. I'm like, no, Pat Metheny. So there was always incredible, great guitar players in Berkeley, and
Mhm.
in this, both in school and alums that are hanging out in Boston, and that's been constant through the whole time. Um, at the time, I felt like it was not the right place for me. I just wanted a little bit of a broader life view. It was very guitar and guitar jazz fusion central. So that's really changed over the years. Now you can get a much broader world outlook from being at Berkeley. Some of the top professors from Harvard have come over and have started teaching liberal arts classes here. So when I first came back in 1989, I joined the faculty. I had moved from Pittsburgh to Boston to study with Mick Goodrick, who was teaching at New England Conservatory at the time. And then after I finished New England, I started playing with some of the Berkeley professors around Boston. I played a lot with Bruno Roberg and Alan Chase. So I got to know some of the faculty members and end up, getting the job teaching here. And, again, there's just so many great players around. And, I started around the same time as John Marasco and Mike Williams, Garrison Fuel. All these guys are gone, so I'm really fortunate that I feel like I'm still here. There's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the first impression was William Levitt sitting in his office, chain smoking and saying, "I enjoyed your CD, Ben."
That's good.
Yeah, and then when I rejoined again in 2000, the first assignment I got from Rick Peckham was, can you teach a course in fretboard harmony? And I thought, okay, well, there's the fretboard and there's harmony. What do those two things have to do at all with each other? And it's really interesting because that kind of thinking about that and putting some together materials has formed really kind of the basis for my whole approach. And I felt really like validated when years later I met Pat Martino and found that was kind of like his same concept. Of course, he had much more lengthy and intellectual approach, but it was the same concept of using the intervallic structure on the instrument. So that was cool. So, that's the thing now that's really changed. The thing that's constant is that there's always, incredible amount of great players here, and you will never be lacking for inspiration from hearing great players. But now what's changed from what is that you can really have a more, get more of a world experience and study some great liberal arts with great teachers and, interface with people, not just in, if I'm a jazz guitarist, but you can interface with people in all aspects of music.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Sheryl, I'm going to kick it over to you right away because you and Ben share this background in Pittsburgh in guitar, and then also a very lengthy experience here at Berklee, starting for Ben in the 70s and for you in the 80s. And so I wonder if you're picking up on some of the things that he's talking about with your shared background, with the idea of fretboard harmony on the guitar, which obviously is a constant topic for us. So I know there's a lot on your mind. I could tell as you were listening to Ben.
Well, when I was a teenager, sorry, Ben, but I saw you play with Tal Farlow.
Oh my God!
Was my in Pittsburgh.
That's unbelievable.
My teacher encouraged my mother to have me skip school to go see this jazz guitarist, Tal Farlow, who had come out of retirement and was out playing. And that was that actually day changed my whole life. I mean, that was amazing.
Wow.
So there was a workshop at Duquesne University.
I know, yes.
Which I went my first year. And I think you might have still been involved.
You went to Duquesne. Wow.
You might have been involved in Duquesne that year I was there. Anyway, but they had the master class and you sat in and played with Tal Farlow. And, all of that just blew my mind. First of all, Tal Farlow. And then you got up there and played with him. And then there were other really great players that
Eric
got up.
Susoff and Andy Fight were the two.
That's right. I remember it. I mean, and
that's incredible.
And then when I was a student at Berklee, you were very generous, and we would play together, and I was.
Well, let's spin that story a little bit now. First of all, Sheryl is one of the 3 people I know in the world that has lived in Pittsburgh, Boston, and New York. The only other one is Joey Barbado, who lives up here.
Sonny.
Yeah. But Sheryl showed up one day, and I was a grad student at New England Conservatory, and Sheryl just calls me on the phone. Hey, I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm a freshman at Berklee. You want to get together and play? I was like, okay. Well, I didn't know what to expect. And we sat down and played, and she was just like ridiculous.
That's very generous of you.
Ridiculous.
Not true, but anyway, thank you. But that was cool. Yeah, it was cool. I mean, I think that's also kind of a good point of conversation about how people build their communities. people come here from all over, and then they meet somebody, hey, I'm from Ohio, or I'm from Pittsburgh, or I'm from, Beijing, or like we have people from all over the world. And those are people that you make connections to and play with all your life. But also, I just want to say about Pittsburgh does have, Barry Galbraith and Joe Negri, of course, and Jimmy Ponder, George Benson. There is a Pittsburgh sound, I think, and a culture that is harmony because, especially with Joe Negri, right? He was
Right.
also a local TV star, and he'd always play his guitar. And, you could go to any guitar store in Pittsburgh, and people are not musicians per se, but if you play a diminished chord, they'll go, oh, that's a Joe Negri chord.
Well, for people that don't know who Sheryl's talking about, this is the guitarist for the Mr. Rogers show, and he was known on the show as Handyman Negri.
That's right. That's right. Also played. Most of us who grew up with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood did not know that Handyman Negri was a
really good jazz guitar player.
Yeah.
Who not only was a great guitar player, he was in the vanguard of making jazz guitar a instrument and a course of study in a university setting, which was very uncommon in that era.
But I think it's also this thing, his influence as a local TV personality. He would always have if someone cool was in town, he'd have him on one of those shows.
Absolutely.
So we had this richness of that culture. But in terms of harmony, and I'm sure you did play tons of his chord solos, for either your recital or whatever, just to get together with your band. And so that sense of combining harmony and the scales and melody. So I don't know, maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
Wow. Yeah. I never studied with Joe. I didn't go to Duquesne. I was actually, was interested in classical guitar at the time when I was going to college, and Carlos Barbosa Lima was involved with Carnegie Mellon, so I was studying, with some of his students, and then Carlos would come in and do master classes. But I did study with John Mayone, who was Joe Negri's student. Wow, damn, Sheryl, we go back farther than I realized.
No, he's a very big influence. He was my teacher when I was 15 years old. So he is like me, heart and soul.
Wow, incredible.
Hey, John, you got to listen to this episode.
So I learned those solos, I guess, at an early age. Actually, I also, when I was young, I was interested in music, and my parents were classical musicians. And I played piano, I played everything. And they sent me to a jazz piano teacher, Frank Conamundo. I don't know if you remember him. You do? Yeah, he had a club, Conamundo's, out in, Oakmont, I guess. And he made me physically, on an old school manuscript paper, in all 12 keys, write out all the major, minor, and dominant seventh chords in all the keys and in all the inversions. So it's that was like a fundamental skill and knowledge that I brought to the table. I see, to be honest, I see like a lack of those fundamental skills in a lot of the younger players. It's just like, if you don't have that basis, and you don't have that sort of off of the guitar, so that you have, what a E flat major 7 chord is without having it in relation to your fingering or anything, then you're not going to be as flexible and able to deal with it on the guitar. In terms of like harmonizing songs and putting them on the guitar, I don't know that that's necessarily something that I per se had, from a young age on. I think that's something that's developed over the years. Part of, just at different points along the way, you get like sort of seminal, like, whoa, that was a complete eye-opener moments. And so one of those for me was going to a class with Barry Harris back at the Cultural Theater in New York. And Barry Harris was like, there's no sharp major 7 sharp 5 13, there's none of that nonsense. There's minor 7 and diminished, and that's it, and everything else is like a suspension between those two. And that like totally flipped me out and put me on my side and opened up the whole Wes Montgomery thing. You realize, oh, it's tonic diminished, so I think that combined with just kind of like sort of an understanding of, just even the basic shell chords and how those are the foundation, and putting things on top of that. And, and then another moment was George Russell, who was teaching the Lydian chromatic concept at New England Conservatory. And he's like, all right, well, just take a voicing for your modes. Just take this cool voicing and play it with all the different roots and see how those sound rather than adjust, so you just kind of come up with these ideas over the years, and you work on stuff occasionally. You take the time to write out a really elaborate arrangement to work out your thoughts. That helps you. I think in general, that would be a suggestion I have for students is, sometimes by jazz improvisation is, in a sense, it's spontaneous composition. So sometimes if you take the time to actually compose something, then that's a way of, really figuring out what it is that you're trying to get out. And so I think that the idea of harmonizing songs, that was a really gradual process.
I really love that, Ben, because I think that is such an important way in for students who are not improvisers, as well as for students who are improvisers, to think about, you are, when you're improvising, spontaneously composing something. So there is form, and there's structure and phrasing and intention and all the things as an interpreter that you care about. You're just doing it in a different way. You're doing it in the moment. And so you do have a point of reference. It's not like starting from scratch. And thinking about harmony in the way you described as, where are things leading to? What is something doing? What's the color of it? Is such a great thing. It like, of course, there's names of chords, and there's sort of, but when you think about the activity of it and the purpose of it and the color of it, it helps people not feel like they're just enmeshed in these math problems they don't understand. And I think this is a really nice bridge, because you do get a lot of students here who are coming to jazz from something else. And I'm wondering how you think about that for them.
Yeah. Well, what you're talking about, improvising and the principles of like leading to something, that happens not only in like, it sounds like you're describing some dense, harmonically complicated, but that happens in playing Little Wing, you have A minor to E minor, and it's like, wow, that's such a poignant change, 4-1. And if you play something, okay, what did you just play on A minor? Now, how is that going to sound on E minor rather than playing something totally removed on E minor? Let's think about how that exact motif would sound in E minor. And so, it's not these concepts are not just for like the most complicated, jazz standards. Improvisation, is a composition. I mean, B.B. King's improvisations are motivically beautiful. So, you can think about it on all those levels.
Yeah. Ben Cody, I saw you smiling, and you're a rock player. You want to jump in there? I know you have a thought about that reference that Ben Sher made.
Yeah, I think it's just, as a alumni from this school, as a rock alumni from this school, I think it's really important that you don't think of, theory or as jazz theory. It's just theory, So whether you're playing like Ben just said, it's like you're going from A minor to E minor. It doesn't matter what genre you're in. It's still the same concept, and it's still, you gotta, the more you know, the better it is for you, regardless of style.
Yeah, like
You
here,
can do with it.
if you don't mind me jumping in, like here's an interesting point. When I studied with George Russell at New England Conservatory, he described two kinds of lines. He described a horizontal line, and that was basically like you take one scale and play it over the whole progression. It's like a blanket. So, of course, he's talking about Lesser Young, but you can think of that as Stevie Ray Vaughan, who, when Stevie Ray Vaughan plays Lillywing, it's going through all these changes, and he plays E minor over the whole thing, and it sounds great. And then he described a vertical line, which is really specific to the chord. And of course, he talked about Coleman Hawkins. But, I'm talking about like the way Jimi Hendrix played the introduction on Little Wing, where he actually sounds the chord. So, if you think about that in terms of like a great rock solo, if you have like just one scale over the whole progression, maybe it's going to get kind of boring after a while. And the same thing, if you just sound each chord, maybe it sounds a little bit like an exercise if you're only sounding each chord. So really, even in a rock tune, having elements of it sounds like a sophisticated concept, horizontal and vertical lines. What is that? But those two concepts really make for great rock solos.
Yeah, that's great. I mean,
What
Sheryl, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say one thing. I love George Russell's, and of course we're talking about the NEC, and of course legendary. We have our own George Russell, who's Pittsburgh guy,
And great,
and great.
sometime. Yes, right. But this is the other George Russell, from NEC.
Yes, and beyond. But I love both their music. But we're talking about this George Russell, Lydian chromatic concept,
Yeah.
whose music I loved, and I love that band, the Living Time Orchestra, which
yeah.
was really big in Boston in the 80s. But
Yes,
I
that's right.
always loved, he had this thing, he said, bebop is about getting there, and modal music is about being there.
Oh, wow.
But like if you can kind of combine those things, right? You can be playing harmonically and in a linear way, right? You're connecting the harmonic ideas with a line.
That's
They're
brilliant.
not
That's a
exclusive
great
of
way.
each other.
I love that way of thinking of it. So Ben, Cher, I have to ask you about rhythm because Cheryl's talking about communities and music, and you and I met at National Guitar Workshop
Oh,
a
yeah.
million years ago, where you and Sheryl were both guests of Jazz Week, and
I
I
think I got the gig because Sheryl couldn't make it one year.
yeah, oh, that's right. Okay, and I was there the whole summer, holding down the classical fort there, and I remember meeting you for two reasons. Number one, because we recruited you to join our midnight Frisbee golf faculty team. Because we couldn't go out. It was like, we had been there the whole summer. We're like, if we cannot go to one more restaurant after concert, like we're just gonna
Yeah,
our health is
explode.
gonna suffer. So we're after all the students have their curfew, we would take these glow in the dark frisbees and play frisbee golf and walk around campus and hang out. And I believe that you were recruited for one of those evenings, and you were a good teammate from what I remember. And also because you're teaching this really brilliant class, which you teach here. It was a Brazilian guitar class, and you had made a book of rhythms to work on, and I still have my copy from that
Oh
old
my God.
still have it in my house. I should have brought it today to show everyone on Zoom, but I thought it was so cool because it was for us as Americans that were there, it was just a really great workbook to work through things. And I wonder if you could talk about just how you think of the importance of rhythm, and also how you approach learning rhythm from other cultures and other kinds of music in your teaching.
Okay. Sure. Well, when I first moved to New York, I was really lucky, and I got on the faculty of the Drummers Collective. It had started off as a school called Sounds of Jazz, and then it moved down and became the Drummers Collective. And I got exposed to to all these masters of world rhythms. Frankie Malabé, Duduka Fonseca, Bob Weiner, a Boston guy who was teaching all of these different traditions. So that sparked my interest in some of these rhythms, which I only knew superficially. I mean, like back 20, 30 years ago, you would see a lead sheet and it would say on it, Latin feel, you know? It's like, okay, guys like Mark Walker or Oscar Segnero are like, okay, so do you want a Venezuelan merengue, or do you want a salsa groove, or do you want a choro, I mean, it's just like South America is a very big continent and it's a lot of different styles. So that bar has raised significantly in the last 3 years, and you can't really be a jazz musician anymore, at least, a New York jazz musician, and not know the difference between playing in clave and playing a samba. Those are, two different things. You can't just be on the bandstand and not have some awareness of that. So anyways, that got me interested in those different traditions. And then I got really lucky. I got the gig touring with the Broadway show Tommy. And we did 2 months in Brazil. So I was playing guitar too. Guitar one goes da 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 da, and guitar two goes wham. What am I doing after the show tonight? And it was just that kind of a scene. I mean, I met like all the guys, and you just go into record stores and they would take me around, and we just like, I really just fell head and shoulders in love with that music, and came home, and I had written some music, and a friend of mine who was kind of a friend, student / entrepreneur, he's like, let's make a record, and I was like, okay, let's try. And I tried some different rhythm sections, and then I called Duduka Fonseca to come out and play. And it just felt so good with him. It was unbelievable. I guess my head was more into Brazilian music than I even realized. And I called up Dominique Eade, who's a friend of mine on the faculty. Alan Chase's.
Yeah.
And I was like,
we've had Alan Chase on the podcast before, who was the former chair of ear training. And Dominique Eade is an amazing vocalist.
Right.
Who's married to Alan. Yeah.
Yes. And I said, hey, Dom, do you have any students or anything that, Brazilian students? She's like, yeah, I do have this one, Luciana Sousa. And, Luciana Sousa. And so I sent Luciana Sousa a couple of my tunes, and she wrote lyrics and sang on the record. And the next thing you know, it was like, okay, Sunday Brazilian brunch at the Blue Note. And that engagement went like 4 or 5 months. And that was serious trial by fire, because, just knowing a couple of bossa novas was not going to cut it with an audience that was from Brazil. So I had to really, research the tradition. And it's just like, American music. It's a rich tradition with lots of different ins and outs and lots of different rhythms. And so, there's a great textbook by Nelson Faria, Brazilian Rhythms for Guitar. And I looked at that, and that helped a lot. But it was kind of like an encyclopedia. I mean, there was like, oh, wow, I could do this or this. How am I supposed to know, like, what to do? So that's been kind of like the strength that I have in teaching Brazilian music, is that I'm not from Brazil. I didn't grow up playing that. So I've had to be a little bit more analytical about it. It's like, okay, what's the basic groove? Here's what Joyce plays. Here's what Rosa Passos plays. Look at the difference in this cell. And I guess, that would be the one thing that about playing that music is it's somewhat like drumming. Like you can't just play constant variations. You have to understand the infrastructure and really have that internalized, and then you build from there. And all of these traditions have that. They're like jigsaw puzzles that are interlocking, and so it's really great. It's really great stuff to learn.
That's great. That's really cool. Ben,
Oh,
Cody.
I have one for you, Kim, too. It's just so funny, Cheryl, it's just so funny what we remember after all these years. I had no idea
Yeah.
Cheryl was it. So what I remember about Kim very specifically from the National Guitar Workshop, we sat at lunch one day and I was playing, nylon electric, and Kim says, "Yeah, you like that guitar? It's really cool with you plug it in and you add some reverb. It sounds great." It's like, "Yeah, I like that." She's like, "My guitar has built-in reverb." You just start playing it and the reverb is in the guitar.
It's kind of true. Yeah. Well,
And it's true. I mean, that's if you listen to Kim play, it sounds like,
that's
an orchestra.
hilarious.
Yeah.
I was odd woman out at the workshop. I would be like the only classical person for until classical week, and then like my people would come and we all had the guitars that didn't have those attachments on there. But like until then, I had to put up with all you guys. I remember, do you remember this? We used to be in these faculty meetings and they would say, like, okay, the faculty concert's coming, you all have to team up. There's not enough time, and you have to limit like the length of your solo.
Uh,
And then someone pointed to me and they're like, well, what about her? Everything she does is a solo. Like, I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, you take like a 5-minute solo. I was like, okay, fine. So that's when I started bringing my famous cardboard charts where like I got everyone to play with me because I couldn't take it anymore.
that's
Being
funny.
accused of taking a 5-minute solo with classical guitar. So it was all your fault, you guys. You pulled me over to the Berklee side ultimately. Which brings me to Ben Cody, because Ben, you have a question that you ask all the time. So ask your question to the other Ben.
Yes, yeah. Just we have all these students here that, they're as students, they're asking all these questions, to all their teachers. But what is the question you think they should be asking that they're not asking, that they're not thinking of asking themselves?
What should they be asking that they're not thinking of themselves? I think that they should be asking, how can I, sort of, how am I supposed to go about this to be, studying an instrument and, having like balance in my life, and what role is, where do I put this? How do I juggle this? I think here at Berklee, where everybody is so intensely wrapped up in what they do, I had a student come up to me yesterday after class and he's like, "Professor Sher, could I talk to you for a minute?" I was like, "Sure." He's like, "What's up?" He's like, "Yeah, I just felt like I really sounded terrible today. I don't know. I've been working on all this new stuff and I'm not playing my old stuff." And I'm like, "Trevor, man, you sound great. I don't know what you're like micromanaging what happened in like a 30-second, you know, solo, and thinking that that's your whole life." So I think we need to make sure as faculty that we, especially for the players that are very intense, don't let that get too, you know, wrapped up in their own, travails to get better and better. And remember, compare is despair.
Ooh, I like that. I mean, I think this is such an important topic because it's kind of come up. There's a thread here in our conversation that you're right, that sometimes we hyper focus on things that we think must define us, like the way I played in that class, or the way I played that phrase, or the note I chose on that chord change. It like betrays that I don't know what I'm doing, or I wasn't prepared, or I don't care about this, or I'm not going to make it, or whatever. But what we forget is that what people remember are these moments that you're not thinking about at all. Like, you're remembering, oh, you and I had lunch together like 20 years ago. And I'm remember like, oh, maybe like 22 years ago, you were super fun to hang out with. And it was really cool after work. We like went and played this game. And Cheryl's like, oh, yeah, when I was in high school, my mom brought me to hear you play. And like, you know what I mean? And those are the things of life. And then music, because we're a community, you will end up with these people over and over and over again. And I think that's hard to think about when you're young. I just want to throw out a little story that happened to me this weekend and get you and Sheryl's reaction to it, Ben, and also Ben Cody. So I was traveling and I was in the lobby of the hotel, and I was in New Haven, Connecticut, and this woman came through, and it was one of those hotels that allows you to have a dog. Right. And so this golden retriever comes through and he's like saying hello to me, and he's just kind of silly and whatever. So I'm talking to this lady, and she sees that I have a guitar, and she's like, "Oh, that's cool. You have a guitar. Oh, you have a Berklee College of Music sticker on your guitar. You know, that program is amazing. They have this thing called guitar sessions." And my daughter went and met the faculty and the chairs there, and it changed her life.
Wow.
And she's like, "What's your affiliation with Berklee?" And I was like, "I'm the guitar chair at Berklee College of Music." And she went on to say that it was one of the students that came, and like many, many people on the first day, which we talk about all the time on this podcast, felt really out of place and called home and was like, I think I made an error. I shouldn't be here. And then by the second day was like, wait a minute. I'm finding my way. I'm finding the people. I'm having a good time in class. Like, okay, I'm meeting some friends. And by the fourth day, the faculty had decided that she would be one of the students we would award a scholarship to.
Wow.
And that's how we all met, is that we, Sheryl and I go, and sometimes Jane Miller, who's the director of that, we go and ask the student to come in the hallway. And the great thing about the guitar sessions situation with that is that like the student was just being herself, and someone noticed her and said, we'd really love for you to audition at Berklee, and we think that you'd be a great part of our community. And what it taught her from her mom's perspective was that like being yourself is enough. Like working really hard at what you do and trying to love what you do as much as you can, and like, being a supportive person in the classroom, and is like, that's what people remember ultimately, as well as how you play. It
Right
sticks
on.
with them. I mean,
Right on.
I know you've experienced that, Ben, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, just, kind of on a esoteric level, I started getting a little bit involved with Buddhism in the last 3 or 4 months. It really has helped me. And it's this kind of a simple concept, but the idea is if you focus only on yourself, it's a recipe for unhappiness. At some point, you're going to be unhappy, whether it's because so-and-so is playing better than you, or, economically you're challenged. But if you can start to change your focus to your love of other people and things, then, you will always feel that you're happy. And so that is, in a sense, what you're saying about being supportive in the classroom and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, Sheryl, what's your thought as this topic comes up kind of at the end of our cup of coffee today?
Well, I think no, I mean, I think that's really beautiful, Ben and Kim, what you're saying, and I think it's important because putting your life path into this art form in whatever way that is, whether you're professional or you're amateur or semi-pro, whatever, or you just, it's about really loving the music, loving to be part of a music community.
Yes, absolutely. Right on.
And you love the music and you love the community, and that's the important thing at all levels. It's not,
that's right. Right on. That's totally right on. Yeah.
It's not so important, these other things. And if we can concentrate on that, thanks for bringing that up, Ben, because I think everybody needs to be reminded of that all the time.
Good. That was what I was going to. Yeah.
I mean, hopefully, because, the hope is that you do this for the rest of your life, right? And so if we're all going to do this for the rest of our lives together, it'd be great if it was if you felt like you
and if you're a lover of if the music can't go on without people that are lovers of the music.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Ben Cody, what about you? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's great doing all these coffee talks because it seems like we always kind of come back to the same themes, which is really just, you know, taking everything. Well, the big one for me was, that it's taking the materials, doesn't matter the the style, the genre, just putting the work, but then also talking about balancing it with all the other aspects of life too, which I think is important to really touch upon. I think that it's good for students and non-students to hear.
I agree. I mean, for everyone who's in school right now, we're coming, it's the fall semester, and once you start to see Thanksgiving on the horizon, it's a real fast move.
It's a turkey.
Yeah, it is. And if you're not in school right now, in a lot of places in the world, it's getting cold and the nights are getting sooner, And so if you're gonna hopefully go home and light a candle or put on a light and grab your guitar and be, in a practice kind of mode, it's a good thing to remember all these things, why you're doing this and how you're doing it, and think about different creative ways to approach both of those things. So I think it's very timely. It's great. A lot of great things came up today. Ben, Sher, do you have a final thought for everyone who's listening?
I'm just really grateful to be part of this great community, and it's so great. I mean, Kim and Sheryl are two people that I've known for, as you have you seen, for a really, really long time, and many people here I've known for a really, really long time, and some I've only met in the past, few years, but they're have become really important friends. So, my gratitude for being part of such a great community.
Yeah. Well, us too, thank you for being with us. And thanks, Sheryl, for being here. And thanks, Ben Cody, as usual. And thank you, Ben Sher. We're going to hang out a little bit longer while we have a second together.
All right, cool.
And thank you all for listening. And we'll be with you on the next Coffee Talk. Have a great week, everybody.